My whole family laughed at my failure. My comeback sent them all into shock. I remember the exact moment, the clinking of champagne flutes and the forced smiles of polite conversation dissolving into a cacophony of patronizing snickers. Vince stood at the center of the living room, bathed in the soft glow of the chandelier, his tailored suit impeccable, his smile as sharp as his words. He was in his element, holding court, as always, but this time, I was his chosen spectacle, the unfortunate centerpiece of his subtle cruelty. My recent public failure, the disastrous launch of Etherbound, was fresh in everyone's minds, a gaping wound he was only too eager to prod, twisting the knife with practiced ease. And then there's Kale. He had begun, his voice dripping with faux sympathy, yet amplified just enough for the entire family to hear, each word a carefully aimed dart. Still chasing those childish dreams of his. Etherbound, wasn't it? A truly spectacular failure, wouldn't you agree? He paused, allowing the implication to hang in the air, a silent, almost predatory invitation to ridicule. A ripple of laughter, tentative at first, then growing louder, more brazen, swept through the room. My aunts, my uncles, even a few cousins who had once feigned interest in my work, now joined in, their faces contorted in a mixture of pity and smug amusement. The sound was a visceral blow, a collective punch to the gut. I saw the dismissal in their eyes, felt the weight of their unspoken agreement that I was, and always would be, the family's resident cautionary tale, a permanent stain on their pristine record of success. Vance, sensing his audience was truly captivated, their attention riveted by my public humiliation, pressed his advantage. "It's time, Kale," he continued, his tone shifting from mock sympathy to a biting, condescending lecture. "To abandon these unrealistic pursuits. Get a real job. Something stable. Something that provides a return on investment. Not just public humiliation." More laughter, louder this time, a mocking chorus that echoed in the elegant room. My younger cousins, ever eager to align themselves with the perceived winner, snickered behind their hands, their eyes glinting with a precocious cruelty. The collective judgment was palpable, a heavy cloak of disdain settling over me, suffocating me. For a moment, the air was thick with the bitter taste of defeat. But as I stood there, the recipient of their unbridled derision, a curious, almost chilling calm settled over me. They saw a man defeated, broken by the weight of their scorn, his hopes shattered. They saw the definitive end of a foolish endeavor. What they couldn't see, what they couldn't even begin to comprehend, was the quiet hum of an entirely different engine igniting within me. A profound, almost spiritual shift had occurred. Their laughter wasn't a death knell. It was a potent catalyst, a purifying fire. Every patronizing glance, every mocking whisper, every single dismissive chuckle was meticulously catalogued, not as an injury, but as vital data, fuel for a nascent plan. I wasn't just standing there enduring. I was observing, analyzing, and committing every excruciating detail to memory. They thought their words were binding my failures to me, but in reality, they were forging a resolve so potent, so absolute, that it felt like an impenetrable shield, a burning core of defiance. I had a secret, a singular, transformative insight, and it was growing within me, silently, powerfully, like a storm gathering on a distant horizon. They were celebrating my perceived surrender, blissfully unaware that I was already charting a course to a destination that would not only redefine my industry but also shatter their smug contentment and send them spiraling into a collective state of disbelief and shock. I simply nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on my lips. They mistook it for resignation. I knew it was the first whisper of a storm they wouldn't see coming until it was too late to find shelter. To truly understand that moment, that quiet defiance in the face of public humiliation, you need to understand the path that led me there, a journey etched deep into my soul. My journey into game development was never just a career choice. It was an obsession, a calling etched into my very being from the first time I held a controller, the pixels on the screen igniting a fire in my imagination. While my peers pursued traditional, sensible degrees, I spent my nights meticulously dissecting game engines, devouring lines of code, and sketching worlds that existed only in my imagination, vibrant and alive. Every spare cent, every waking hour, every ounce of my youthful energy was poured into this singular pursuit, a relentless devotion. My parents, bless their hearts, tried to be supportive, offering nervous smiles and hesitant encouragement, but their anxieties were always palpable, echoing the societal expectation of a predictable, safe life. Vince, on the other hand, made no such pretenses. His disdain was barely veiled. Vance was the family's golden boy, the shining beacon of conventional success, dazzling and sterile. From his early days in debate club, where he honed his verbal weaponry, to his rapid, calculated ascent in corporate law, he epitomized flawless achievement. He always had a perfectly curated life, a meticulously planned trajectory that left no room for error or, God forbid, passion that didn't generate immediate, tangible profit. His interactions with me were a masterclass in subtle, grinding condescension. He'd offer unsolicited advice, each word a thinly veiled criticism of my hobby, and endless comparisons to his own, realistic and profitable ventures. He spoke of my dreams as quaint, a childish phase I desperately needed to outgrow, sometimes with a dismissive chuckle, sometimes with a faint sigh of concern. He'd bring up my student loan debt at family dinners, implying that my artistic pursuits were a financial drain, a burden on my future, a testament to my irresponsible nature. I remember one Christmas, years ago, when I excitedly showed him a prototype of a small puzzle game I was working on, my heart brimming with a fragile hope. He barely glanced at it, his eyes already drifting away, instead launching into a monotonous monologue about the economic realities of the tech industry, concluding with a dismissive wave of his hand, a gesture of absolute finality. Stick to what you know, Cale, and leave the real money-making to those with a business sense. It was never explicit malice, no shouted insults, but a pervasive, grating sense of intellectual superiority that chipped away at my confidence, not in my abilities, but in the validity of my dreams in their eyes. In the eyes of the world he represented, Earthbound was supposed to be my triumph, the resounding answer to all their doubts, the definitive proof that my path wasn't foolish, but destined for greatness. It was a sprawling, ambitious indie RPG, a labor of love that consumed 5 years of my life, every last penny of my meager savings, and countless sleepless nights fueled by caffeine and an unyielding belief. I believed in its heart, its innovative mechanics, its richly woven lore. The initial buzz was promising, pre-orders were respectable, and I truly believed I was on the cusp of something significant, finally at the precipice of vindication. But the truth, as it often does, arrived with a brutal, unceremonious crash that echoed through my very core. The launch was, in a word, catastrophic. Critical bugs riddled the game, turning ambitious features into frustrating glitches. Server issues made multiplayer unplayable, severing player connections, and a crucial design flaw alienated a large segment of the player base, turning enthusiasm into rage. The internet, in its infinite, merciless wisdom, became a storm of furious, one-star reviews, memes mocking my aspirations, and vitriolic comments demanding refunds. My reputation, painstakingly built over years through sheer effort and dedication, disintegrated in a matter of days. My finances were obliterated, my savings account a stark, terrifying void. I was not just back to square one. I was in negative territory, emotionally and financially bankrupt, adrift in a sea of public scorn. That public humiliation, the direct aftermath of Earthbound's implosion, was the crucible, the refining fire that burned away everything but the raw truth. For a time, I wallowed in the despair, the bitter taste of failure coating everything, a suffocating shroud. I felt utterly broken, consumed by the weight of my mistakes. But amidst the wreckage, amidst the agonizing silence of shattered dreams, a flicker ignited. It wasn't a spark of hope, not yet, but a cold, analytical flame. I started dissecting the failure, not just the technical bugs, which were merely symptoms, but the deeper systemic issues, the industry's reliance on outdated paradigms, its stubborn inability to adapt to rapidly evolving player expectations. I began to see patterns, inefficiencies, and untapped potentials that no one else seemed to recognize, like a hidden language suddenly revealing itself. This was my secret weapon, not a new game, but an entirely new approach to game development, distribution, and player engagement. It wasn't about building a better game within existing frameworks. It was about tearing down those frameworks entirely and rebuilding something fundamentally different, something that leveraged decentralized technologies, community-driven content, and dynamic asset ownership in ways no major studio had dared to attempt, paralyzed by fear of change. I formulated a plan that was audacious in its scope, technically complex beyond anything I had attempted, and incredibly risky, demanding every ounce of my courage. Yet, I realized, with a thrilling certainty, it was inevitable. It was the next logical, necessary step for the industry, a leap forward I called Nexus. I wasn't just going to make a comeback. I was going to reshape the landscape itself, fundamentally. And I would do it in absolute secrecy, learning from every brutal past mistake, leveraging every last ounce of my remaining ingenuity, and fueled by the quiet, burning ember of vindication, a cold fire in my gut. After that devastating family gathering, I effectively vanished from their social radar. No holiday visits, no obligatory birthday calls, no responses to their increasingly rare and often perfunctory texts. They misinterpreted my silence as capitulation, a retreat into the shadows of my perceived failure, a testament to Vance's superior judgment. Vance, in particular, thrived on this narrative, his smugness growing with each passing month of my supposed obscurity. I would hear snippets from my mother, hushed reports of Vance's casual, confident remarks at other gatherings. Cale's finally facing reality, I suppose, a late bloomer. Or, it's a shame he wasted so much time, but at least he's out of that silly game phase. Each report, rather than stinging, simply reinforced my conviction, hardening my resolve. Their smugness was a perfect, protective shell for my true intentions, a deceptive camouflage. As they collectively basked in my imagined downfall, I was meticulously, obsessively, and quietly channeling every fiber of my being, every waking thought, every ounce of my remaining energy into Nexus, a digital phoenix rising from the ashes of Etherbound. My tiny apartment became my sanctuary, my fortress of solitude, a chaotic nexus of whiteboards covered in complex algorithms, screens displaying endless lines of shimmering code, and countless cups of cold, forgotten coffee. I worked with an intensity one hadn't known was possible, fueled by an internal furnace of determination that burned brighter with every memory of their laughter. I reevaluated every single aspect of Etherbound's failure, stripping it bare. The bugs were a symptom, not the root cause. The root cause was the monolithic, centralized development model that choked innovation, stifled creativity, and alienated players, turning them into mere consumers. Nexus was conceived as the absolute antithesis of this, a paradigm shift. It was a platform, not just a single game, a decentralized ecosystem where creators could build without constraint, players could truly own their digital existence, and the community could genuinely govern its evolution. I delved deep into blockchain technology, smart contracts, and decentralized autonomous organizations (DAOs), not as speculative investments, but as fundamental, unbreakable building blocks for a new paradigm of digital ownership and creative collaboration, a truly democratic virtual world. This wasn't merely about making a game. It was about building a thriving, self-sustaining virtual economy, a living digital universe. The challenges were immense, almost insurmountable. Learning entirely new programming languages, grappling with the nascent and often unstable world of decentralized infrastructure, and designing an intuitive user experience for such a complex system demanded every ounce of my intellect and resilience, pushing me to my absolute limits. There were moments of crushing doubt, dark nights when the sheer scale of my ambition felt suffocating, when the weight of past failures threatened to overwhelm me. But then I would recall Vance's condescending laughter, the collective dismissal, the look of pity in my aunt's eyes, and those memories would ignite a new surge of fierce, cold energy. This wasn't about revenge in the petty sense, no. It was about profound vindication, about proving not just to them, but to myself, that my vision was valid, that true innovation required a willingness to challenge established norms, to burn down the old to build the new. I contacted a few trusted former colleagues, individuals who shared my disillusionment with the traditional industry and possessed specialized skills in areas like smart contract auditing and user interface design. I pitched Nexus to them, not with a fancy presentation or slick graphics, but with raw passion, the fire in my eyes, and a meticulously detailed technical roadmap that laid bare the audacity of my vision. They saw the vision, the audacity, the revolutionary potential. They joined me, not for upfront payment, which I barely had, but for a stake in a revolution, a belief in a shared future. We operated in absolute stealth, a small, dedicated team working out of my cramped living room, fueled by shared purpose and an abundance of ramen, communicating through encrypted channels, our progress a closely guarded secret. We knew the established players would dismiss us, just as Vance dismissed me. This silence, this invisibility, was our greatest strategic advantage, our cloak. While they remained fixated on conventional metrics and incremental improvements, blindly following outdated maps, We were building a foundation for an entirely new digital universe, brick by painstaking brick, laying the groundwork for a seismic shift. Vance's continued arrogance, his public pronouncements of my sensible retreat, merely solidified my resolve, adding fuel to my internal fire. He saw a void where I had once been, tangible proof of his superior judgment. Little did he know, that void was simply the space I needed to build an empire, unseen. The annual family reunion was always held at the sprawling, opulent estate of my great-aunt Eleanor, a matriarch who valued tradition and propriety above all else, a bastion of old-world expectations. This year, the air felt particularly charged, thick with an unspoken anticipation. Word had slowly trickled through the grapevine that I had returned to the public eye, not with a whimpering retreat, but with a series of cryptic, highly technical announcements that had vaguely hinted at something significant in the gaming and tech communities. The family, steeped in Vance's deeply ingrained narrative of my failure, struggled visibly to reconcile this with their comfortable preconceptions. Vance, of course, remained outwardly unperturbed, holding his head high, though I noticed a subtle shift in his usual confident stride, a slight, almost imperceptible tension around his eyes. He still held court, still dominated conversations with his booming voice and authoritative pronouncements, but there was an underlying current of unease, a desperate need to reassert his authority, to stamp out this inconvenient rumor. As the evening progressed, the conversations inevitably circled back to me, the elephant in the meticulously decorated room. My cousins, previously so quick to laugh, now approached with a hesitant curiosity, their eyes darting nervously. "So, Kale," one ventured, his voice a little too casual, "heard you're back in gaming?" The question hung in the air, a precarious mix of genuine interest and a readiness to revert to their old mocking if my answer proved unsatisfying, a test of my perceived stability. I smiled, a calm, knowing smile that unnerved them, a silent challenge. "I've been busy," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the anticipation bubbling beneath the surface, the storm waiting to break. "Building something new, something extraordinary." Then Vance, ever the opportunist, ever seeking to control the narrative, smoothly interjected. He had been lurking nearby, listening, waiting for his moment to pounce, to corner me. "Building, Kale? Are we talking about another one of your digital fantasies, perhaps a slightly more sophisticated one? Or have you finally taken my advice and invested in something tangible, something real, perhaps a nice property development, something with actual returns?" His tone was jovial, laced with a familiar, cutting condescension, but his eyes, sharp and calculating, sought to pin me down, to force me back into the comfortable, defeated box he had so carefully constructed for me. The family tittered, a few still willing, out of habit, to follow his lead, their laughter like dry leaves skittering across a cold floor. I turned to face him fully, my gaze unwavering, a silent force. "Actually, Vance," I said, my voice carrying just enough to capture the attention of the entire room, silencing the titters. "It's something far more substantial than property. Something that makes property development look quaint. It's called Nexus." As I spoke the name, the word resonating with quiet power, I pulled out my phone, which was connected to a hidden projector I had strategically placed earlier, its lens almost imperceptible. A holographic display flickered to life in the center of the room, shimmering with light, projecting a stunning, intricately detailed virtual world that rotated slowly, revealing its immense scale and vibrant life. A collective, audible gasp swept through the room, a gasp of pure, unadulterated awe. This wasn't just a game, it was an incredibly lifelike, dynamic metaverse, breathtaking in its scope and detail. "This is Nexus," I continued, gesturing to the shimmering holographic world, my voice infused with a quiet pride. "It's not just a game. It's an entirely new digital ecosystem, built on decentralized principles. Players don't just play. They own their assets, their creations, their digital identities. Every item, every piece of land, every character is a unique, immutable NFT stored on the blockchain. We've created a self-sustaining economy, powered by a cryptocurrency I designed specifically for this purpose, a true digital nation." A stunned, almost reverent silence descended. My relatives stared, mouths slightly agape, their eyes wide with disbelief, processing the impossible vision before them. They saw the cutting-edge graphics, the seamless navigation, the sheer scale of the world I was demonstrating. Vance's face, which had initially registered a flicker of confusion, quickly shifted to something deeper, more profound, utter disbelief, then dawning horror. And just last week, I continued, my voice steady and clear, cutting through the silence like a knife, we concluded our first public land sale on Nexus. In under 24 hours, we sold virtual plots of land equivalent to the value of a small island nation in real-world currency. The initial investment round, which closed quietly last month, saw participation from some of the biggest names in tech and venture capital, individuals who recognize the revolutionary potential of true digital ownership. The future of the digital economy. I paused, letting the staggering implications sink in, letting the numbers echo in the stunned silence. The room remained completely quiet, save for the faint hum of the projector, a tangible tension in the air. Vance, for the first time in my life, looked utterly, completely lost. His jaw was slack, an uncharacteristic weakness, his eyes darting frantically between the holographic display and my calm, confident face, searching for a flaw, a trick, anything to explain what he was seeing. The flawless corporate lawyer, the man who always had an answer, a cutting retort, was speechless, robbed of his words. The family, meanwhile, was slowly, painfully beginning to process the true magnitude of what I was saying. Small island nation. Biggest names in tech. These weren't the words of a failed indie developer, a cautionary tale. In fact, I added, stepping closer to Vance, my voice dropping to a direct, almost intimate level, meant only for him. Though everyone strained to hear, the valuation of Nexus, as of this morning, has officially surpassed the collective market cap of 3 major publicly traded gaming companies. And it's only just beginning, Vance. The real money-making, as you called it, has truly just begun. I looked him directly in the eye, and for the first time ever, I saw his carefully constructed facade crack, splintering into irreparable pieces. The flawless corporate lawyer, the man who always had the last, cutting word, who always controlled the room, was utterly, brutally speechless. His eyes, usually so sharp with judgment, were clouded with pure, unadulterated shock, a glimmer of fear. The laughter that had defined my previous visit was replaced by a silence so profound, so heavy, it spoke volumes of his complete, public humiliation. The game had not only changed, I had rewritten the rules entirely. And they had no idea I had been holding all the cards, dealt from a deck they didn't even know existed. The immediate fallout was a sight to behold, a symphony of shifting allegiances and crumbling facades, a delicious irony. Vance remained frozen for a full minute, his face a mask of utter bewilderment, the color slowly draining from it. His usual confident posture had utterly wilted, his shoulders slumping ever so slightly, as if the weight of the chandelier above him had suddenly become unbearable. When he finally managed to articulate something, it was a strangled, disbelieving whisper, barely audible. That's impossible. A game? A virtual world. He looked around the room, as if seeking confirmation from the stunned, equally bewildered faces of our relatives, but found only their own shock reflecting his back at him. His voice, usually so commanding, so unwavering, was now trembling, almost pleading for someone to tell him this was a misunderstanding, a cruel joke, anything but reality. The family, previously so quick to embrace Vance's narrative, so eager to join in the mocking chorus, now looked at me with a mixture of profound awe and a palpable, agonizing regret. My Aunt Clara, who had been among the loudest in her commiserations about my childish dreams, now pushed frantically through the small crowd, her eyes wide with a desperate need to bridge the chasm she had helped create. "Cale, dear boy," she stammered, her voice thick with forced warmth. I had no idea. This is truly extraordinary. Astounding." Her words, meant to be congratulatory, were laced with a desperate need to reclaim some semblance of connection, to erase the sting of her past judgment. My Uncle Robert, who had once advised me, with a weary sigh, to get serious about spreadsheets and stop dreaming, now clapped me on the shoulder, his grip almost painfully tight, as if to physically anchor himself to my success. "My word, Cale, this is revolutionary. Absolutely revolutionary. You were always thinking big, weren't you? A true visionary." His voice was thick with a forced enthusiasm that rang hollow, almost a caricature. Their previous laughter, their dismissive remarks, now hung in the air, an invisible shroud of collective embarrassment, a ghost haunting the room. They were scrambling, trying frantically to retrofit their previous contempt into a narrative of unwavering belief, of having seen it all along, but their contorted faces betrayed them completely. The Zygarnik effect was at play in their minds. They'd had a clear, satisfying, and deeply flawed ending to my story, failure, and now I'd ripped the page out, leaving them with an incomplete mental loop, desperate for a new, coherent, and far more palatable conclusion. Vance, meanwhile, began to pace, a caged animal, muttering to himself, his meticulously styled hair slightly disheveled. I could see the gears turning frantically in his corporate lawyer's mind, trying to comprehend the true financial implications, the market disruption, the sheer, unimaginable scale of what I had just unveiled. His flawless success image, so meticulously cultivated for decades, was not just challenged, it was actively crumbling before their very eyes, dissolving into dust. He had publicly mocked my spectacular failure as definitive proof that I should get a real job, and now my unrealistic pursuit was commanding a market valuation that likely dwarfed his collective annual income and placed me at the absolute forefront of an industry he didn't even understand, a world utterly alien to him. The irony was a bitter pill he was forced to swallow publicly, each moment a drawn-out agony. His face flushed to deep crimson, not from anger, but from profound, burning humiliation. He looked cornered, exposed, profoundly un-Vance-like, stripped bare of his carefully constructed persona. I remained calm, observing their raw, unfiltered reactions with a quiet, deep satisfaction that settled in my bones. There was no need for grand pronouncements or petty gloating. Their shock was my ultimate vindication, a far more potent statement than any words I could utter. When my cousin Jessica tentatively approached, her eyes still wide, offering a hesitant "Congratulations, Kale, really, this is amazing," I simply offered a polite, distant smile, a slight inclination of my head. I didn't need their validation now. I had found my own. Their disbelief, their utter bewilderment, was more powerful than any applause, more satisfying than any fawning praise. Vance finally stopped pacing, his eyes fixed on me, still searching, still lost. He opened his mouth, as if to speak, then closed it again, the words apparently failing him, choked by the lump of his shattered pride. The man who always had the last, cutting word, had none left. He simply turned, his shoulders slumped in utter defeat, and walked out of the living room, leaving a stunned, breathless silence in his wake. The collective state of disbelief among the family was profound, almost sacred. They had witnessed not just a financial triumph, but a complete reversal of their established order, a shattering of their smug contentment, replaced by an unsettling awareness of how profoundly, how irrevocably wrong they had been. It was beautiful chaos. Months turned into years, and the tremors from Nexus's reveal rippled far beyond our family's living room, creating a seismic shift across industries. Nexus didn't just redefine my industry, it completely reshaped it, becoming the definitive blueprint for the next generation of digital experiences. It evolved into a truly decentralized metaverse where creativity flourished without bounds, and digital ownership was not a theoretical concept but a tangible, empowering reality for millions. Major tech companies, initially skeptical, even scornful, were forced to adapt, scrambling desperately to implement similar decentralized strategies, often failing to capture the organic, vibrant, community-driven magic that Nexus had cultivated from its inception, its very DNA. My name, once synonymous with Etherbound's spectacular failure, became synonymous with visionary innovation, a titan of the new digital age. I found myself on Forbes lists, speaking at global tech conferences, and advising on the very future of the digital economy, my voice now commanding respect in boardrooms around the world. My personal life, once consumed by the desperate, clawing need to prove myself, to silence the critics, settled into a peaceful, deeply fulfilling rhythm. The financial security Nexus provided was significant, certainly, but the profound sense of accomplishment, the quiet, intrinsic satisfaction of having brought such a complex and ambitious vision to life, of having created something truly transformative, was far more valuable than any sum. I built a new studio, not an empire of glass and steel designed for ego, but a collaborative space, a vibrant hub designed for creators, fostering the very spirit of innovation and community that Nexus embodied. I no longer had to chase opportunities. Indeed, they sought me out, forming a queue at my door. I was no longer driven by external validation, by the ghosts of past laughter, but by the intrinsic joy of building, creating, and seeing my vision ripple outwards. The constant hum of what if that had plagued my early career had finally quieted, replaced by a deep, resonant calm. I was, undeniably, at peace, a peace-hard one. Vance's trajectory was predictably less stellar, a stark contrast to my own. His initial shock and public humiliation at the reunion had left an indelible mark, especially within the family, a wound that never quite healed. His once unquestioned financial acumen and infallible judgment were now perpetually shadowed by his public dismissal of my childish dreams. He continued his corporate law career, successful by conventional metrics, certainly, but his aura of flawless superiority, his unassailable confidence, had evaporated, leaving behind a faint, almost pathetic echo. Family gatherings, once his grand stage, became uncomfortable affairs where hushed whispers followed him, and his pronouncements no longer commanded the same unquestioning respect. Their power diminished. He still attended, perhaps out of a stubborn refusal to fully retreat, but his position as the family's intellectual and financial authority had been irrevocably shattered, a crown fallen. When we occasionally crossed paths, his greetings were curt, almost perfunctory, his gaze avoiding mine, unable to meet it. There was no malice left, only a profound, quiet resignation, a ghost of his former self. The man who had reveled so gleefully in my public humiliation was now perpetually overshadowed by my quiet, strategic comeback, a living testament to his misjudgment. The rest of the family, too, underwent a significant shift, a collective reevaluation. Their previous dismissiveness transformed into a mixture of genuine pride, deep awe, and a lingering, palpable regret that occasionally surfaced in awkward apologies. They occasionally brought up my early struggles, but now framed them as character-building experiences rather than spectacular failures, rewriting their own memories to fit the new reality. They sought my advice, no longer on getting a real job, but on tech investments or emerging digital trends, eager for a piece of the future I had built. I treated them with polite respect, acknowledging their shift without dwelling on their past judgments, for the need for their approval had long vanished, rendered moot by my own journey. Their reevaluation of me was a testament to the fact that their perception, not my reality, had been the ephemeral, fleeting thing. The true lesson nestled within this journey is profoundly simple, yet often overlooked, lost in the noise of conventional wisdom. They thought my story ended with a laugh. They didn't realize it had just begun, a new chapter written in the crucible of their scorn. The world will always have its critics, those who define success by their narrow, conventional metrics, those who will dismiss your dreams as childish, your failures as definitive. They will laugh, they will mock, and they will bask in your perceived downfall, perhaps even celebrate it. But true visionaries understand that setbacks are not endings, but